Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, November 26th, 2024. Time for another show. It is Tuesday of Thanksgiving week, so busy day. I don't know if there's going to be any cooking going on in the background, unless there's something we need to prepare way in advance. Although I think there might be. We had plans for our in-house pastry chef, I guess, to begin on one of his massive projects that he's thinking about, but there was never any chance that was going to happen at 9 in the morning, right? So, okay. Just mild, ordinary sound effects and interference in the background, plus, of course, the rumble of the lingering cold, and already a note for the editor to get back to work. Okay. Lots to catch up on. Of course, we're back in the Trump era, so lots of noise being created, not all of which will result in actual policy change type coverage, because it might not come to fruition. Some of it might be fake, but we all have to chase our tails every time Donald Trump threatens one thing or another, and I guess they're already out there doing it. Today's episode of the Trump follies, whether or not that's what we spend our time on, is another thing, but today's episode of the Trump follies is that yesterday Trump used his social media platform. We can't say tweeted out, right? What did they say? Oh, truth. They truthed out. I know, that's very dumb. But so many things are. That he would be imposing new tariffs across the board on all imports from Canada and from Mexico because reasons. Both because he felt there were too many immigrants coming across the border, I guess from both countries, and something fentanyl as well. And until that is fixed, we're going to impose 25% tariffs across the board. Interestingly, he also announced that there would be an additional tariff for imports from China, and the Chinese imports would be getting an additional 10% tariff. I don't know why the special treatment for China. I mean, it's not special vis-a-vis the rest of the world, I guess, but they'll all get their own tariffs shortly enough. Not sure why the special break. Why not 25% for China as well? I mean, anybody who knows anything about the way anything works in this country, or eats things, or looks at boxes of things where they buy them and it says made in Canada, made in Mexico, they get some sense of, or if they're looking just to see, is this product made in the USA so I can buy it with pride? And they find out, no, made in Mexico or in Canada, so where I can buy it with an apology, I guess, in Canada. But yeah, the world is having to react. I don't know if it's time to panic just yet, because we're stuck in the middle place. A, it's transition time only, and B, it is Donald Trump we're talking about. He might forget. They might block it in court. He might decide not to do it. It might have been a fake the whole time. It says here on my social media feed, Carl Quintanilla has reported because I don't know whether, CNBC and NBC News. I don't know which outlet he was working for when he said that the Mexican President Sheinbaum, remember that it's a Jewish woman president in Mexico, who says she's sending a letter to President-elect Trump in which it is reported, according to Reuters, that the Mexican president says that it will not be threats nor with tariffs that change the migratory phenomenon nor drug consumption. Neither will be addressed with tariffs, of course. And so she's being, normal and level-headed in the face of Trumpism. And, what else are you going to do? She's playing her part correctly. There's no normal reaction to this sort of abnormality. All right, so from that, I guess we can move on to some of the rest of it. We can speculate, and why not? It would be reckless of us not to speculate at this point. But Yeah, the tariff idea, I mean, should it come to fruition, of course, I don't know, some enormous percentage of what you pay for at the grocery store. Remember, Donald Trump, very concerned about grocery prices, though for some reason he decided to phrase that as, I'm beginning to hear the word groceries more and more. I never heard this word groceries before, but now everybody's talking about groceries. Well, we're going to fix the groceries very, very strongly, very quickly. A very strong grocery man came up to me with tears streaming down his eyes, as he likes to say. Sir, you must do something about the groceries. So I did. He actually, I don't know, what a weird position to take as man of the people, the billionaire who never heard the word groceries before. But okay. But that seems to be something they said they want to concentrate on. But some enormous percentage of our groceries, eggs, vegetables, tomatoes in particular, for some reason, people were focusing on yesterday. I guess eggs from Canada, tomatoes from Mexico. So that's it for the Western omelets, right? The Denver omelet has been destroyed. But that's a blue state, so it's okay. And all right, well, any number of things. And of course, as some others pointed out, we have a housing crisis in this country. Housing prices are too high. So the first thing we're going to do is cut off our best supply of lumber for building the houses. And then the other most important, most expensive input, the labor to build those houses. Hey, guess where that one comes from? Very largely from or through Mexico. And that'll be a shot in the arm for housing prices. But again, nobody cares. If prices go up and people complain that prices are up, they'll say it's Biden's fault. If they're not sure whether prices are up or not, Trump will say prices are down, and then they'll be happy again. The whole thing is easily enough faked if you're willing to put out false information. He just, Alabama weather charts, hurricane weather charts, this one with a Sharpie, and says, guess what? Huge success. And in fact, that could happen at any point, right? But he'll just say, guess what? The tariffs worked, and we raised X number of billion number of dollars. And by the way, the number will go up every time he says it. Tomorrow, we've already raised $10 billion with the tariffs. And then this afternoon, $12 billion, $95 billion, $3 trillion has been raised already before we're even in office, which we get credit for, by the way, because we actually, so, you can claim anything and, the countervailing claim, well, we're only going to have these tariffs in place temporarily until they fix the immigration and drug problem. All right, they fixed that too. When he needs it to go away, it'll go away. And no, he doesn't have to wait until January 20th to do it either, right? He can just say, well, come January 20th, instead of saying day one, I'm going to impose these tariffs, he can just say the threat of the tariffs changed the direction of these two governments. They've fixed the problem at my behest, and everything's fine now, and I don't have to put these tariffs in place. So we get all of the benefit of the policy change, which didn't happen, and all of the benefit of keeping prices low, which they aren't, and which I had nothing to do with. So it's entirely possible he could just be pulling something like that or anywhere in between. But now, this is the chaos, right? Do we plan for, let's make sure that if we're a big business, say, and we spend lots and lots of money importing things from, any of our biggest trading partners, Mexico, Canada, China. That's about, probably like 70% of our trade. So if you get anything from or through those countries, do you panic and stock up? Do you figure he'll never do it? Do you figure he'll never be able to make the bureaucracy work in order to implement it even if he wants to? Do you think he's going to be faking it? Do you think his staff is going to fake it and just say they did it and keep the old man happy? I don't know. Any number of those possibilities and any combination of those possibilities is possible. How do you plan for that? And the answer is he's not very good for a business environment. That's actually economy wrecking. But on the other hand, what if you told your people that it was economy awesomizing? I don't know, very strongly economy-ing. And they said, it is. And I already have a hat, so I'll buy another one. And now, how's consumer confidence? That's what we're measuring. It's great because everyone's an idiot. All right. Well, what can you do? So So, there's that. There's a couple other stories that I was reminded of along the way as we were reading some of this stuff. Golly, there's an awful lot. Let me read you the Washington Post write-up of the tariff situation. And again, how do you cover it? As a newspaper, I guess you got to cover it as he says he's going to do this. He means to do it. Let's analyze what it would mean to have 25% tariffs across the board from China or from Canada and Mexico, and 10% from China. And then, very few. I don't think there's going to be a lot of newspaper reporter attention, maybe opinion columnist attention to, this isn't going to happen, or something less than is going to happen. But on the news side, they say Trump promises specific tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico. Or, of course, I think we have to get used to the pronunciation again. It's China, Canada, and Mexico. So, if enacted, they would violate the 2020 deal that the United States inked with Canada and Mexico during whose first term? Donald Trump's first term. Do you think that matters to him? Not at all. David Lynch and Neha Massi have put this together. I hope I got the names right on that. President-elect Donald Trump said Monday he will issue executive orders imposing new tariffs on all imported goods from China, Mexico, and Canada, the nation's three largest trading partners, as one of his first acts on Inauguration Day. I think they might address the mechanics of this and whether or not, that's the way it works with tariffs. It's not usually just, you can't tweet out tariffs. There has to be some paperwork signed somewhere, and you should check it. By all means, there's no telling whether or not it's forged, for that matter. Trump said the tariffs of 25% on Mexican and Canadian goods and 10% on Chinese merchandise would be aimed at halting an, quote, invasion of drugs and migrants into the United States. That's also a great tariff policy, too, right? Well, we will demand that the business sector of these countries be made accountable for the crime sector of those countries. Sure, why not? To Trump, it's all the same, right? Crime, money, that business, same thing. So that's the plan. This tariff, this is him writing on Truth Social, which truthfully you don't have to read in his voice, but I don't know. Somehow it's weirder and funnier if you do. This tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. And as you know, migrants hugely, hugely concerned at all aspects and all phases of their migration with the reputation of the government of the country from which they're migrating. So, I don't want to embarrass Mexico or Canada or China. So I'm going to obey the law in the United States because we're all ambassadors, as it was. So anyway, as we were told on field trips, same thing, migration, field trip from school, it's all the same. But anyway, he goes on to say, both Mexico and Canada have the absolute right and power to easily solve this long simmering problem. We hereby, by social media, we hereby demand that they use this power, and until such time that they do, it is time for them to pay a very big price, Trump wrote in a post on Truth Social, his social media site. In a second post, Trump blasted Chinese leaders for not following through on earlier promises to impose the death penalty on fentanyl producers in China. That's one of the problems with other countries. They don't always obey your laws. The threatened tariffs would affect large swaths of the U.S. trade. Goods valued at more than $1.5 trillion move among the three North American nations. You might remember we have a free trade pact with these other countries, and it was revised under Trump and doesn't contemplate this kind of tariff, but, he's forgotten. It's been a long time. Also, he doesn't care. So let's see. While the United States and China exchange about $600 billion worth, U.S. imports from Mexico include cars, machinery, electrical equipment, food, and beer. Canada supplies oil and gas. No one cares about that, right? Machinery and parts and much else. The United States relies on China for electronics, particularly phones. Are you listening on one now? along with toys, furniture, and plastics. Economists warn that tariffs could affect grocery prices, which he knows about now. You have heard of groceries, which were a key election issue. Wow. And by the way, affect them in the opposite direction of the key promise of the election. But so what? Mexico supplied more than half of U.S. fresh fruit imports in 2022, according to the Agriculture Department. What they didn't provide, they probably picked when it was grown here. So, you know, it's kind of a big deal. Let's see. Trump's social media posts on Monday are his most detailed comments on his tariff plan since he won the election this month. By the way, they're the most detailed since ever, since he even began discussing tariffs, all through the campaign. While demanding more specifics from Kamala Harris, the press said, he's not saying how much the tariffs will be and on who or on what, but he might be meaning across the board. But he hasn't said what percentage, and that's kind of that's one of the big inputs that you'll want in the math of these things. So you can figure out, what it's going to do and whether it's going to work. Anyway, he said that on January 20th, he will sign, quote, all necessary documents to impose the import taxes via executive order. Now, during the campaign, he vowed to impose tariffs of up to 60%. So one time he got a number. 60% on Chinese imports, plus 10 to 20% levy on products from other countries. And then, of course, he did not only different numbers, but the reverse in terms of where the penalties really lie. John Verano, maybe, a former trade negotiator under President George W. Bush, said the announced tariffs would violate U.S. trade commitments. But who cares? Under the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, remember they got rid of NAFTA, or renamed it USMCA, which took effect in 2020, goods moving among the three North American nations cross borders on a duty-free basis. That would mean no tariffs. Obviously, unilaterally imposing a 25% tariff on all trade blows up the agreement, says Verano, a partner at Covington and Burling in Washington. Each country affected by the president-elect's plans is likely to retaliate with tariffs on U.S. goods, which will hurt exporters, he said. In a joint statement following Trump's posts, Canadian Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland and Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc addressed Trump's concerns head-on. Now, if they really addressed them, they're addressing his concerns head-on, so they're sympathetic and nice and diplomatic. If they address Trump head-on, they say, he's an idiot, we can't stand him. But they're addressing his concerns head-on. Canada places the highest priority, on border security and the integrity of our shared border, they said, calling fentanyl from China and other countries a scourge that Canadian and U.S. law enforcement agencies work together every single day to disrupt. I'm sure they said it in there somewhere. They just sane-washed it out of there. The statement pointed to the close relationship between the two countries, describing it as balanced and mutually beneficial. Local government leaders in Canada reacted to the announcement with dismay. Francois Legault, how does he pronounce? How does anybody in French pronounce it? Legault, the head of Quebec, that's interesting. The head of Quebec, really? Okay, one of Canada's largest provinces. I'm aware. Said the decision poses an enormous risk to Canada's economy and it should do everything possible to avoid the tariffs. Describing the impact of tariffs as devastating for workers, Ontario Premier, he gets a premier instead of head of, Doug Ford, urged Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to convene an urgent meeting to prepare a response. Those are usually pretty good for responses. By the way, I did see somebody throw out there, Canada, not really usually often named as a target for tariffs and as a predatory trade partner or as a source of any of these enormous problems, usually. But someone speculated, Melania has a crush on Justin Trudeau, so Trump threw Canada in there to punish them. Maybe. Trade policies that would hurt Canadian interests were a U.S. election outcome that long feared in Ottawa. In the run-up to the vote, Canada sent top officials to meetings across the United States meant to stave off a turn to protectionism. Didn't work. Mexico, maybe it did. We'll see. Mexico did not respond immediately to the threat. The Mexican government, which has discounted the likelihood that Trump would impose stiff tariffs given the impact they would have on the U.S. economy, has sought to emphasize that it has been stopping U.S.-bound migrants, driving down the number reaching the border to the lowest in years. But so what? If you acknowledge that, then Biden gets credit, so screw that. Around 1/3 of Mexico's GDP depends on cross-border commerce with the United States, and analysts said the proposed tariff would be ruinous. This measure would violate TMEC, that I guess is the Spanish initials for the North American Free Trade Treaty, and would send North American relations into a downward spiral. Arturo Saracon, the former Mexican ambassador to Washington, wrote on X for some reason. Let's see how both governments react, as well as U.S. consumers and businesses. Well, that's Liu Pengyu, a spokesman for China's embassy in Washington, said the counter-narcotics authorities in China and the United States remain in close communication, adding that his country has taken action against narcotics operations in certain cases following U.S. requests. No one will win a trade war or a tariff war, he wrote. Also in a post on X, should have used TikTok. Fentanyl is an issue for the United States. In the spirits of humanity, China has given support to the United States' response on this issue. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said in a brief statement late Tuesday local time that it did not mention tariffs or trade. We hope the United States will not take China's goodwill for granted. The Canadian dollar lost 1% of its value relative to the U.S. dollar shortly after Trump's announcement. Can't afford that. According to the Globe and Mail, the U.S. dollar rose 2% against the Mexican peso, and the markets in Asia tumbled. Tariffs on Mexican and Canadian products would be especially disruptive in the auto industry. Half-finished vehicles often move across North American borders several times before they're completed. I didn't know that. Adding a 25% fee to each movement could erode automakers' profits or give consumers sticker shock. The USMCA replaced the 1994 NAFTA agreement, which Trump criticized during his first presidential campaign. Trump publicly hailed the new accord on several occasions, boasting that it represented an enormous improvement over the original trade pact. The USMCA is the fairest, most balanced, and beneficial trade agreement we've ever signed into law. It's the best agreement we've ever made, he said. In January of 2020, just before a year before, leading an insurrection against one of the signatory countries. The treaty includes a provision for a review of its terms in 2026. The Trump team has already been eyeing potential changes designed to prevent China from using Mexico as an export base for its electric vehicles, steel, and other goods. The tariff threats come at a time when migrant encounters at the U.S.-Mexico border have fallen. The U.S. Border Patrol recorded far fewer migrants illegally crossing the border from Mexico in fiscal year 2024 than the previous 2 years. On the border with Canada, numbers are much lower, but have gone up, but only by 70%, because you know how it is with Canada and the exchange rates. This is not the first time that Trump has tried to use trade policy to address unrelated issues. In May of 2019, he announced a series of escalating tariffs against Mexico designed to pressure the Mexican government into stopping Central American migrants from crossing its territory. Trump said he would impose a 5% tariff on Mexican goods, which would increase in 5% increments each month until the border problem was resolved. The announcement sparked criticism from business representatives and some Senate Republicans at the time, who called it a misuse of presidential tariff authority. It was. But then they concluded, he may have been using it as a bargaining chip and trying to get to this trade agreement. A little over a week later, Trump lifted that tariff threat, saying that Mexico had agreed to take strong measures to curb the influx. Trump's plan to use trade policy as a tool to address two of the nation's most vexing and complex problems, drugs and immigration, drew praise from a dumb guy, Bill Ackman, a hedge fund manager, and the guy chiefly responsible for drumming out the president of Harvard University. Trump, quote, is going to use tariffs as a weapon to achieve economic and political outcomes which are in the best interest of America, fulfilling his America First policy, Ackman wrote on X. This is a great way for Trump to effect foreign policy changes even before he takes office. I think that's the aim. But Ernie Tedeschi, a former chief economist for Joe Biden's Council of Economic Advisors, said the North American tariffs would cost a typical American household almost $1,000 a year. That's actually the last word in it. So, if you're a last word freak, that comes out great. But if you were interested in what does this mean for me, it was literally the last thing the writers thought to include for your perusal this morning. Okay, so what else do we want to try to shoehorn in segment number one here? Well, golly, there's an awful lot. And, how about, I guess we got a note for the record, though we really should be reading more about it, that Jack Smith, of course, has filed his request that the cases be formally dismissed, although it does say that they're dismissed without prejudice. That is to say that the charges could be reinstated at some later date. I don't know what, if any, statute of limitations issues there may be, but it leaves the door open, so people were hanging their hat on that. And the judge has at least granted at least one of those motions, Tanya Chutkin. It would be rather extraordinary for her to decline to grant the motion to dismiss from the prosecution. But we'll read up on what that's about. And I did mention yesterday all the rumors over the weekend that Kelly Loeffler was going to land herself a place at the Department of Agriculture ended up not being true. There was a backstory to that, but I thought I might at least tell you before the break who the Agriculture Secretary is going to be. It's Brooke Rollins, about whom I know very little. And I don't think very many people do, but there is a story, and the Washington Post has got it, that Trump taps Brooke Rollins for Agriculture Secretary, rounding out cabinet picks. Rollins runs the America First Policy Institute, which probably gives you some hint about where she's coming from ideologically, which has largely stayed out of the spotlight, but has made numerous proposals for the second term. I think a lot of things ended up being integrated into Project 2025, and she was a big talker about it. Megan Vasquez wrote the profile of her, and we can rely on that to give us some background about, a little bit about who she is and where she comes from. We'll do that after the break, and we'll tell you some of the backstory about Kelly Loeffler and why we're surprised that didn't happen, because it would have been apparently an enormously corrupt pick. Why did he not go for the corruption? That is an odd choice for him. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, I see a progression opening itself up to me, but it requires a lot of reading, and that sucks. So let's turn it into a music instead. But yeah, I got to tell you this. Okay, so first of all, there was the new Agriculture Secretary. I'll tell you a little bit about her because she's going to be in the cabinet and eventually probably be called upon to answer questions about 25th Amendment. But President-elect Donald Trump announced on Saturday that he had picked Brooke Rollins, a former Trump White House policy advisor, to serve as Agriculture Secretary. Some boilerplate, congratulations, she's wonderful, blah, blah, blah stuff. Anything interesting in, I guess someone probably wrote this statement for him. Brooke's commitment to support the American farmer, defense of American food self-sufficiency, and the restoration of agriculture-dependent American small towns is second to none. And these tariffs are going to kind of get in the way of that, but whatever. Rollins is president and CEO of the America First Policy Institute, a group that has put together proposals for a second Trump term. The institute, which has nonprofit status, was launched in 2021 by a group of Trump administration veterans. Like the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, AFPI has sought to provide policy recommendations for the next Republican presidential administration to efficiently, well, I don't think I care about efficiency, but efficiently stand up an executive branch that will swiftly undo President Joe Biden's legacy. That's right there in the Washington Post. That's what they say they want to do. The organization's work has comparatively flown under the radar and has not been publicly scrutinized by Democrats as Project 2025. The organization is chaired by Linda McMahon, Trump's pick for education secretary. So 2 cabinet members coming out of that operation. Rollins was also one of the names floated to serve as Trump's incoming White House chief of staff. That I did not know. That's remarkable. But the role ended up going to Susie Wiles, his top campaign advisor. Rollins previously led the White House Domestic Policy Council during Trump's first term. Before joining the first Trump administration, she led the Texas Public Policy Foundation, a conservative think tank. Is she related to Ed Rollins by any chance? I don't know. It doesn't say anything in here so far. I guess we could look up in Wikipedia. Maybe they know. In his statement on Saturday announcing Rollins' appointment, Trump highlighted her practitioner's experience with agriculture, including pointing to her upbringing in the small and agricultural-centered town of Glen Rose, Texas, as well as her involvement in guiding her 4 kids in their show cattle careers. I get the sense that she's not really a hands-on farmer per se, but I guess they owned a ranch in Texas. You know, maybe. Rollins subsequently thanked Trump, writing on X, "It'll be the honor of my life." Do we care? I don't know. But yeah, one's got a small town ag girl from Glen Rose, Texas. Maybe yes, maybe no, but that's the claim. The agriculture secretary is responsible. Oh, they're telling us what they do. Overseeing various farm, ranching, and forestry industries, as well as regulating aspects of food quality, safety, and nutrition labeling. That's true. It's a good reminder. More than 70% of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's budget oversees several crucial welfare programs, such as free school lunches, they're gone, and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, commonly called food stamps, or SNAP, of course. And I guess she'll get rid of that as well. The president-elect's incoming agriculture secretary is also expected to play a role in shaping Trump's plan for sweeping tariffs. There's the through line, which in his last term saw the U.S. agriculture industry hit hard with huge retaliatory duties by allied countries and rivals alike. Trump's pick to lead the Department of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has vowed to play a role in the administration's, it does say vowed to play a role in the administration's role in shaping the agriculture industry, but Trump and his allies have also proposed making large cuts in the SNAP program. With Rollins, Trump has now announced the full lineup of his proposed cabinet secretaries. On Friday night, Trump announced a flurry of new picks to his administration, including 3 proposed cabinet secretaries. Scott Turner to lead the Department of Housing and Urban Development. By the way, true to form, if you don't know anything about Scott Turner and you wanted to visualize the guy, think Trump, housing and urban development. What does that mean to him? Same thing that it means to name a energy secretary. Well, energy, oil, gas. Very little to do with what the Department of Energy does, but fine. Go ahead. Scott Bessent to lead the Treasury Department. He's already having problems. And Representative Lori Chavez DeRemer, how does she pronounce that? I don't know. She's is a Republican congresswoman from Oregon, but I guess she's out. She lost. And so she needs a new job, and she's going to lead the Labor Department, which is funny because she won't even that saves her from filing for unemployment, I guess. She's already bringing unemployment statistics down. Congratulations, Lori. Well done. Okay. So, as I said, there's a couple of through lines here that we should be looking at. And one of them is a big story, and really need to get to it. I want to do it right away. I also want to read about Jack Smith, but it might end up waiting. And that's a sad story anyway. But there's a big story. You probably have heard it already, but I want to go back to something we started on yesterday and didn't read all the way through because we were running out of time. From the Washington Post, the article from who was on this one? Ashley Parker, Josh Dawsey, and Michael Scherer, whose article was titled "Sharp Elbows and Raised Voices Inside Trump's Bumpy Transition." Remember this? Subheader was, his freewheeling team has returned to the patterns of his first term in office with shouting matches, expulsions from meetings, and name-calling. If you don't remember why, I'm headed back to this one, but you do know the big story of the day so far that I haven't touched on. You'll see what I'm doing here, heading back for more background. Donald Trump's attorney and advisor, Boris Epshteyn, arrived recently for a meeting about cabinet picks in the tea room at Mar-a-Lago, only to find his way blocked. And we pause at this point to make fun of the idea that there was a tea room, right? Transition co-chair Howard Lutnick, CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, told Epshteyn in front of others that this meeting was not for him. We're not talking legal nominees today, Lutnick said, according to one person familiar with the exchange. Epshteyn refused to budge. Using his forearm, he pushed Lutnick out of the way, according to two people familiar with the incident, which Lutnick later recounted to others. I'm coming in, Epshteyn retorted, according to one of the people. A third person described the incident as more like Epshteyn simply brushing past Lutnick on his way into the meeting, and someone close to both men said the two have been working together closely and assisting President Trump in putting together the greatest administration in American history. We surmised that was Stephen Chung, but he usually doesn't go off the record for stuff like that. Somebody missed out on getting credit for licking Trump boots. But okay, Epshteyn and Lutnick both declined to comment, and Epshteyn, as it turns out, was busy elsewhere, and you know where. In any other presidential transition, such a showdown and physical confrontation between two top advisors to the president-elect would be a show-stopping breakdown in decorum. But in Trump's freewheeling orbit, chaos, the incident was soon forgotten, as his team had returned to the patterns of his first term in office, with shouting matches, expulsions from meetings, and name-calling, all between the public celebrations and rocket ship photo ops. As during Trump's first term, competing factions have begun to run roughshod over each other, sometimes kicking up clouds of dust. This portrait of Trump's blooming team of rivals, which I call the team of Hagues, of course, is the result of interviews with more than half a dozen aides, advisors, confidants, and others involved in the transition process, many of whom spoke on condition of anonymity. And that was where we noted, I think we left off at this point. No, there was a little more. I recognize some of it, but this was the newspaper language for long article coming. Elon Musk, who has embraced the nickname First Buddy on his social network, X, maybe you've heard of it, I think we said that yesterday, got in recent tense discussion at Mar-a-Lago with Epshteyn in full view of others, and said that was said by people familiar with the incident. Incoming Chief of Staff Susie Wiles has also had to traffic cop meetings, asking people to leave when they're not welcome, but that's the job of the Chief of Staff. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance even took to social media this week to dress down a lieutenant of another Trump whisperer, Stephen K.G.B. Bannon, calling her, remember this, a mouth-breathing imbecile for criticizing Vance's decision to work with Trump instead of attending Senate votes. So I guess there were some close Senate votes, and they needed his vote to, be on the record, and he was busy sucking up to Trump. And, you got to stay in close proximity to this guy. If you leave, someone else will take your seat, and they'll try to make themselves attorney general. I mean, come on. That's actually probably the right move for him. Anyway, many in the power centers in the first Trump term have moved on. There we mentioned Ivanka and Jared Kushner, who may or may not really have moved on, but just want to keep a lower profile. Same with Kellyanne Conway and Steve Bannon, who it is said now operates from a distance. But new camps have formed with little sign that Trump sees conflict as a problem at this point. At the same time, none of these people interviewed for this article described factions as vast and warring during the 2016 transition and early days of the first Trump White House. Let's see. None of the people interviewed for this article described factions as vast. Okay, whatever. And Trump has picked cabinet members quickly, essentially filling the most of the top jobs days before Thanksgiving. While some of the picks are viewed as challenging Senate confirmations, many have been widely praised by Republicans. The president loves it when people are kind of going at it with each other because it often is the way to get the right people, someone involved in the discussion said. A transition official downplayed any tensions. Blah, 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 President Trump, dedicated transition team, full of patriots, that whole thing. Oh, there's Stephen Chung, right? President Trump won Then the bigger, mandatory lie. President Trump won a historic election in decisive fashion, something landslide. Pete Hegseth A former Fox and Friends weekend co-host and Trump's choice to lead the Defense Department is facing a challenging confirmation process following reports that police investigated an allegation in 2017 that he sexually assaulted a woman in a hotel following a Republican conference in California. He has denied the allegations, said the encounter was consensual. It involved roofies, but was consensual anyway. Because as you know, as a student in Princeton, he wrote, if a woman's unconscious, then it's not rape. Because there's no duress. Except for the being unconscious part. Matt Gaetz, Trump's initial choice for Attorney General, was accused of paying for sex and having it as well with a 17-year-old girl at a drug-fueled party. Allegations Gaetz has denied. On Thursday, Gaetz withdrew his name, saying he believed he'd become a distraction. He's always a distraction, a bit of a clown. The transition has unfolded as a rolling set of gala events, or does anybody prefer the gala pronunciation? I do not. But gala events and business meetings with clear cliques beginning to emerge. In one group, unofficially helmed by Trump's oldest son, Donald Trump Jr., sits Vance alongside other longtime MAGA warriors, such as former Fox News host Tucker Carlson and former administration official Cliff Sims. And I think, by the way, Matt Gaetz was aiming to be a part of that clique, I would guess. He's got a big fan in Donald Trump Jr. Another group, unofficially helmed by Wiles, consists largely of her cadre of loyal and disciplined campaign aides, including Trump's 2024 political director James Blair and Deputy Taylor Budowich. I had heard that name anyway. One person familiar with the dynamic, however, described these silos as two friend groups that are totally politically aligned in support of Trump and his agenda. A third group consists of people connected to the America First Policy Institute, including AFPI President Brooke Rollins. Now we know who she is. Transition co-chair Linda McMahon, who Trump on Tuesday announced as his choice for Secretary of Education, and Keith Kellogg, who served as National Security Advisor to Trump's previous Vice President Mike Pence, who he tried to murder, which was a national security issue. But anyway, the group served as a sort of government in waiting during the campaign and held an event at Trump's club last week, but many observers have been surprised at their lack of influence in these first few weeks. I mean, I don't know how much influence you're going to have if you are a Mike Pence guy, but what kind of a Mike Pence guy are you, by the way, that you would place yourself back in a Trump administration? There is also a number of independent actors, and here we get to the through line, whose power extends directly from their personal relationship with Trump. Epshteyn, Boris, that is, a longtime advisor who took a coordinating role in Trump's criminal defense efforts in recent years, frustrated a number of fellow Trump advisors when, on a flight to Washington last week, he encouraged Trump to pick Gaetz for Attorney General. He was not the only person on the plane who was supportive of Gaetz for Attorney General. I mean, Gaetz was on the plane. He was supportive of it. And Epshteyn played a crucial role in a number of picks. The fledgling relationship between Epshteyn and Musk, the billionaire SpaceX and Tesla chief who Trump tapped to lead a, quote, Department of Government Efficiency, at least they're putting it in quotes, has also been strained. Musk grew frustrated with Epshteyn over what he saw as his outsized influence over staffing and Musk's belief that he, Epshteyn, was leaking to the media, griping to anyone who would listen, including Trump. So now you're beginning to see, again, more of the through lines, because you know the story, you know the news, I think, already about Boris Epshteyn. Now you're beginning to see Elon Musk hates him, thinks he's leaking to the press all the time. What would be a great way to get rid of Epshteyn? Leak something to the press. We discussed briefly the other day my belief that Don Jr. probably was influential in the Gaetz pick and that he might lose influence with the Gaetz pick having imploded. But if the Gaetz pick can be blamed on Epshteyn, that, again, dovetails nicely with what's happening in the news with Epshteyn today. It might help push him further out, even though I don't know whether I believe that his relationship with Trump is over. Nobody's relationship, if you're grifty enough, is ever over when it comes to Trump. All right, moving on. The tensions came to a head last week on the patio of Mar-a-Lago, where so much espionage and tension happens, in what one witness described as a big blow-up and a huge fight. The two men grew loud as Musk accused Epshteyn of leaking, with Epshteyn replying, "I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do anything wrong." Wow, what a blow-up. Axios first reported the fight on the patio. It's Boris against the world, said one Trump confidant. And you're seeing how that's coming out. While another described him as on an island of his own. Ooh, dangerous. I mean, that's how this is getting set up. We see it coming now. I wish we had read this the other day. But one of them added that Epstein's power emanates from Trump himself, who appreciates him as a loyal fixer and attack dog. We know why there's dramatic music coming. But it's interesting to read this just from a couple of days ago with no hint of what there was to come. Epstein, for instance, was part of the legal effort that culminated Friday with the judge in the Manhattan hush money case against Trump indefinitely postponing his sentencing. Last week, someone in the president-elect's orbit helped agitate Trump after sharing with him a folder of clips from Sims's 2019 book, Team of Vipers, about his time in the Trump administration, a behind-the-scenes memoir that was critical of some of the people around Trump, but not of Trump himself, which will be okay. After the memoir, Sims worked his way back into Trump's graces. We've seen it go back and forth 100 times, and people who said he was Hitler ended up as his vice president, so it's not a surprise. Serving as a key deputy to then Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe, Trump's current pick for CIA director, as well as coordinating speech writing for the 2020 and 2024 conventions, hosting a fundraiser for Trump in his home state of Alabama, and working closely with Lutnick on the transition. But the dossier of old news stories about the memoir briefly angered Trump until Sims's various allies, including Lutnick, Ratcliffe, Trump Jr., Vance, and Wiles, helped calm the president-elect down, wiped the ketchup off the walls, and gave a string of on-the-record quotes in support of Sims to Politico, which first reported the incident. There's another through line to all of this, by the way, which is an article I don't know if we'll get to, about that one weirdo staffer that he keeps around who, remember, we heard about her during the trial when he kept falling asleep, and she was the human printer. She walks around with a portable printer and prints out positive news stories about Trump and hands them to him to keep his spirits up. She's back in the news, too. And I wouldn't be surprised if any of the... in rehabilitating Sims's reputation, whether she played a role in planting stories in Trump's hands at the behest of others to make that happen. Anyway, less than 3 weeks after the election, Musk has already begun rubbing some people the wrong way. I mean, he is a sociopath and a weirdo and someone that no one likes, but he's rubbing people the wrong way with his omnipresence around Trump, earning headlines for being a house guest who overstays their welcome, a Cato Kalin, if you will. But for now, like Epstein, he has a powerful constituency of one, the president-elect, who on Tuesday traveled to Texas to join Musk for a SpaceX Starship rocket launch. Trump probably can be convinced that Musk is not mooching off of him because, well, I'm not mooching off of you. I actually have more money than you. Oh, yeah. But I mean, if you're just sucking up his resources and living off of his generosity, then you are sucking up his... Anyway, doesn't really make a difference, but it would probably convince Trump that you're not because you have more money somehow. Lutnick, who some privately describe as an alpha, oh no, with a big ego, has also irritated some fellow Trump advisors who complain of his aggressive personality. Lutnick exasperated Trump in his behind-the-scenes maneuvering for Treasury Secretary, including lobbying Trump himself. Though Lutnick did not persuade the president-elect, he did emerge with a plum assignment nonetheless as Trump's choice for Commerce Secretary. Another surprise was Trump's decision to choose Sergio Gore to head the White House Presidential Personnel Office, a quiet but influential role that helps staff the federal government. I thought that was going to go to, or maybe that was the job that Johnny McEntee had before, and he's getting an even bigger job at, OPM, perhaps, this time around. Anyway, Gore, along with Trump Jr., founded Winning Team Publishing, the firm that produces Trump's books. And the president-elect likes Gore because, and it's Gore, G-O-R, by the way, no E on the end, because of the money he's made him on book deals. I can't believe it. Multiple people briefed on his decision said, and some of the tensions have begun to spill over into public view. On Tuesday, Vance went after Grace Chong, the chief operating officer of Bannon's War Room podcast, calling her, That's the mouth-breathing imbecile. And that was after she attacked him for missing Senate votes on Monday when Democrats approved a new judge to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. You guys better show up and do your one frickin' job, Chung wrote, referring to Vance and Senator Marco Rubio, Trump's pick for the Secretary of State, except those guys now have 2 jobs. So, yeah, I guess she was a little bit off base on that one. Anyway, after Vance insulted her, she deleted her post, while Vance followed suit soon after, but the first line of Chong's X profile now reads, mouth-breathing imbecile. All right, well, you could put that on Truth Social. That's at least the truth. All right, so what does all this lead up to? You know where it's going. Let me read you which one will we start with here? The Washington Post. I have a Post and the Times on this thing. What should it be? What did I just read? Was it, should I alternate? I forget which one I just read already. Okay. Well, it might have been, that was a Washington Post. So maybe I'll go to the New York Times for their description, just to flip-flop back and forth. Hey, it's Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan. What do you know? They have the story about that was the through line we've been darkly hinting at this whole time. Top Trump aide accused of asking for money to, quote, promote potential appointees. You know what that's about. You know who it's about. The Washington Post headline on this story, by the way, Trump aide sought payments from job seekers. Internal legal review found. But again, we'll head back to the New York Times. President-elect Donald J. Trump, the subheader tells us, ordered the investigation by his legal team into Boris Epshteyn, who was at one point his legal team. A powerful figure in the transition, Mr. Epshteyn denies the allegations. If you haven't heard, you might be saying, what the hell? Given the story we just read. But now that we read about who's stabbing who in the back and why and what their favorite methodologies are, this will make some more sense to you. President-elect Donald J. Trump's legal team found evidence. I can't believe it. Really, just end the story there. They found evidence. Okay. That a top advisor asked for retainer fees. Retainer fees from potential appointees in order to promote them for jobs in the new administration. 5 people briefed on the matter said on Monday, Mr. Trump directed his team to carry out the review of the advisor, Boris Epshteyn, who coordinated the legal defenses in Mr. Trump's criminal cases, and I guess learned to become a criminal that way, and is a powerful figure in the transition. Several people whom Mr. Trump trusts had alerted him that Mr. Epshteyn was seeking money from people looking for appointments, 3 of the people briefed on the matter said. But you can imagine Trump thinking, that makes him smart. Just as you don't pay taxes. You've avoided taxes your whole life. That makes me smart. Boris Epshteyn is extorting money from people based on your name. That makes me smart, but it makes me smart. It makes him smart for doing it. Makes me smart for then extorting him. This makes me mad unless you kick up 60% of the take to me. Or in fact, 80% of the take. Why not? And 10% to Ivanka. David Warrington, who was effectively the Trump campaign's general counsel, effectively. It's interesting. Again, remember we read all about how they structured their campaign. They had like 12 staffers officially, and then a bunch of satellite organizations who housed everybody else. Warrington, I guess that's why we end up saying, was effectively Trump's campaign general counsel, conducted the review in recent days, the results of which were described to the New York Times, which is what we're reading. The review claimed that Mr. Epshteyn had sought payment from 2 people, including Scott Bessent, whom Mr. Trump recently picked as his nominee for Treasury Secretary. Well, why are you bribing, or why are you asking for bribes from the Treasury Secretary? Answer, that's where the money is. According to the review, Mr. Epshteyn met with Mr. Bessent in February. Okay. At a time when it was widely known that he was interested in a Treasury post. February. Really? Okay. That's a long time ago. And he proposed a $30,000 to $40,000 a month retainer to, quote, promote Mr. Bessent around Mar-a-Lago, Mr. Trump's estate in Florida, which couldn't have come as a surprise, although maybe he was surprised about who he was supposed to pay for that. I guess he may have thought maybe Walt Nauta. is the person you pay to squire you around Mar-a-Lago. But I mean, he knew what he was in for, I would say, Bessent, right? He knew very clearly that in order to get into the administration, you had to become a Mar-a-Lago member, pay Trump $200,000, and then start hanging out there all the time, and then, you know, have the temerity to stick yourself next to him whenever possible. And I guess any help you can get with that is maybe worth considering. But maybe he didn't think Boris Epshteyn could really pull it off because he declined. He also did not partake in another effort by Epshteyn, described in the report, to get him to invest in a 3-on-3 basketball league. Wow, weird. Okay, but played along with him to avoid offending such a seemingly powerful figure in Mr. Trump's world. Yeah, I'll invest in 2 out of the 3 players. How about that? I don't know. 3-on-3 basketball league? Is that necessary? Mr. Bessent then called Mr. Epshteyn on November 14th to see whether he was criticizing Mr. Bessent to people around Mr. Trump, the review said. Well, that was, you know, gutsy of him to call and confront him directly. Mr. Epshteyn told Mr. Bessent that it was, quote, too late to hire him, and that he was Boris Epshteyn with an expletive between the 2 names. That's actually how they describe it to me, which you can't talk that way to me. It's too late for you. You're out. I'm Boris effing Epshteyn. He then suggested that the hiring was for consulting. The second person cited in the review was a defense contractor from whom he sought $100,000 a month during the transition period anyway. Well, that's short, so, hey, only about $250,000. The report said Mr. Epshteyn depicted his own hiring as do or die for the person's prospects. According to the review, the contractor did not hire Mr. Epshteyn and is fearful of retaliation, the review found. The document ended by saying that Mr. Epstein's proximity to Mr. Trump should be, quote, terminated. Wow, we'll see whether that happens. In a statement issued Monday evening through the transition, Mr. Epshteyn said, I am honored to work for President Trump and with his team. These fake claims are false and defamatory and will not distract us from making America great again. And they were able to do it. Stephen Chung, back on record here, a spokesperson for the transition now, said, as is standard practice, a broad review of the campaign's consulting agreements has been conducted and completed, including as to Boris, among others. We are now moving ahead together as a team to help President Trump make America great again. So an avoidance statement there. It was unclear what standard practice he was referring to. A lawyer for Mr. Bessent said both he and his client declined to comment. Well, there's more, but you see how these through lines are developing? Very interesting. Is it a real story? Is it true? Does it matter? We don't know. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue reading the New York Times account of what Boris Epshteyn may or may not have been up to, whether he was really soliciting these bribes. It's not beyond him by any means. It's a very Trumpy thing to do, but it also could just be, hey, Boris Epshteyn is a big pain in my ass, and I would like to be either the guy who is always in Trump's ear about the hirings, or I would like to solicit $100,000 a month from other people in order to squire them around and convince them that I could get them a job. That's a lucrative trade. I can have that job, but only one person can have it at any given time. We need to shiv Epshteyn and get him the hell out of here. Or it could be, you know, Don Jr., I'm tired of Epshteyn getting in my way all the time, telling me I'm not important. Or Trump saying, I am sick of that guy. He smells bad. Get rid of him. Give me an investigation that will justify getting rid of him. Or I heard he really is squeezing these people for money and I need a percentage of that. Let's leak this report so that we can put the screws to him. So where do we leave off? Details about the review and about the behavior Mr. Epshteyn is suspected of were reported earlier by the website Just the News, which I understand to be a conservative site. So that's interesting. It's run, in fact, by John Solomon, a conservative writer, I would put that in quotes, who is close to Mr. Trump and was asked in 2022 to serve as his representative to the National Archives when the Justice Department was investigating Mr. Trump's retention of classified documents after his first term as president. Mr. Solomon's reporting closely tracked with the internal Trump team review as described to the Times. And if you don't remember John Solomon, he used to work for The Hill. He was an editor there. He was essentially, I think, pushed out for being too obviously credulous of Trump and the Moscow view of Trump, and too willing to push big lie stuff. A very big active conspiracy theorist himself. And as I recall, he was big in the Hunter Biden story and in attempting to frame Joe Biden for having been a participant in some kind of wrongdoing with vis-a-vis Ukraine and the officials there, that led to the first impeachment of Donald Trump. Well, he's still active. And what's interesting is he's stabbing others in the back. That's amazing. And that's how quickly you get rehabilitated in Trump world. Boris Epshteyn really has nothing to worry about. So long as he, makes the right payments, he can be rehabilitated. Steve Bannon's been rehabilitated 10 times. Anyway, let's see. In an interview with Mr. Solomon, Mr. Trump said, "I suppose every president has people around them who try to make money off them on the outside. It's a shame, but it happens. But this is a hell of a quote, but no one working for me in any capacity should be looking to make money." I'm not going to pay you. There's that level. But also, no one should be looking to make money that I don't get a piece of. I think that should be pretty obvious, too. Even before the spate of stories, Mr. Epstein's outsized influence on the transition and his input on a range of positions, despite his lack of a formal role, has jarred a number of people in the incoming president's orbit. Among them was Elon Musk, who has been close to omnipresent, there's that word again, at Pervalago, and had privately expressed surprise that Mr. Epstein had been granted so much authority. It remains to be seen whether there will be any impact from the internal investigation. I just could see Elon Musk's wondering, I don't understand. This guy's not even a billionaire, not even a one-time billionaire. Why is anybody listening to him? This is a club for billionaires. Get out. All right. Anyway, it seems interesting for Mr. Working Class, forgotten guy, but, whatever. That's more of the hypocrisy working there. It remains to be seen whether there'll be any impact from the internal investigation. That's true. Mr. Trump has over time credited Mr. Epsteyn for sticking by him even after the calamitous end of his last presidency. Mr. Epsteyn is currently under indictment in Arizona in connection with trying to overturn the 2020 election results. He's big in the fake electors plot. But Mr. Trump's son, Eric Trump, issued a pointed warning on Fox News on Monday evening while asserting that he had never known Mr. Epsteyn, with whom he went to college. Really? I see. Oh, okay. It's not that he never knew him, but okay. That he had never known Mr. Epsteyn to be anything but a good human being. All right. Sorry, I didn't finish the sentence there. There was that other phrase inserted in there, distracted me. Right? He said, "My father's been incredibly clear. You do not do that under any circumstance. And believe me, there will be repercussions if somebody has." I'm sorry, if somebody was. Whatever, okay. He added that he hoped that the reports were false, but that if they were true, the person will probably no longer be around. Oh, Paulie, you don't got to worry about him no more. Over the years, several Trump advisors have had consulting contracts with outside clients. Mr. Trump has at times been suspicious of such arrangements, asking whether candidates being recommended for endorsements are paying his advisors or whether companies being brought to him are financially intermingled with his aides. It's an interesting question for Trump to even bother asking. I don't know whether he thinks it looks bad, could create a scandal. That's not the Trump I know. I guess it was more like, well, if somebody's paying them off to bring me this recommendation, where's my piece of it? Mr. Epsteyn, who has minimal political experience outside of working for Mr. Trump, has been paid for consulting work by Republican candidates running in local or statewide races since Mr. Trump left office. I think I read the Washington Post version of the story, and it named his clients. There's one or two named here, and they were all incredible losers. This is kind of an amazing losing track record. But one of those candidates, Carl Palladino, ran for Congress in New York, complained to the Times that he was not exactly sure why he had paid Mr. Epsteyn $20,000 a month. He was not endorsed by Mr. Trump in his 2022 race. He was highly recommended as having good relations with some people that worked for Trump. Mr. Palladino said in 2023, "I was told that it would be in my interest if I sent money to this Boris. I did, and we heard nothing from the man. He was totally useless." Some former aides to Mr. Palladino insisted that Mr. Epshteyn had provided advice to the campaign. Wow, gee, thanks. That's really great. Now I'm interested in taking a look through the Washington Post article because I think there was a slightly longer list of Epstein clients named. Mostly it's, of course, the same story. Let's see. Oh, the existence of the review, they say, that was first reported by CNN, as opposed to the New York Times saying that they, I don't know if they said they were the first ones to know, but that they had gotten some special access. Some of the elements of Epstein's conduct were first reported to by Just the News, a conservative website, on Monday afternoon. We heard that before. Then there was the quote about no one should be looking to make money. Oh, by the way, in Washington Post side, we are reading the work of Isaac Arnsdorf and Josh Dawsey. But I'm pretty sure that there's a different listing of the clients. Let's see. Epshteyn, by the way, it says, later asked Besant to invest $10 million in that 3-on-3 basketball league. In case you're wondering about the numbers. After the election, Besant came to believe that Epshteyn was knifing him. That's a quote, knifing him. And as he sought to be chosen to serve as Trump's Treasury Secretary, in a call set up between the two, Epshteyn said that he was Boris effing Epshteyn and that Besant should have paid for his services sooner. According to a person familiar with the legal findings, he later confronted Besant in person at Mar-a-Lago. He confronted him, really, in what witnesses believed to be an intimidating way, the legal review found, in an exchange that was viewed by multiple Trump allies. There was no comment on that from Besant. Soon after the election, Epshteyn approached a former Trump administration employee who works as a defense contractor, right? He wanted to get $100,000 a month out of him. Contractor declined, saying the proposal made him uncomfortable, and spoke to the lawyers conducting the review. People familiar with the matter said. Let's see. There is, of course, Epshteyn worked for Trump following the 2020 presidential election and was indicted in Arizona for his role in organizing Republican electors to falsely attest that Trump had won the state. But there's also that he pleaded not guilty to. But he was arrested in Arizona also on an unrelated matter in 2021, eventually pleading guilty to drunken disorderly conduct. So, there's that too. He has subsequently led the president's legal team in recent years over the various criminal indictments. Yet he's been a polarizing force in Trump's orbit, accumulating many enemies while keeping close ties with Trump himself. He demanded all the president's other lawyers work through him, and some have chafed at his actions. Since the November election, Epshteyn has played a large role in the transition, spending hours of the day at Mar-a-Lago and recommending candidates for jobs. He has extensive access to Trump's daily schedule and thoughts about policies and personnel, giving him potential value to other political candidates and business interests. His suggestions included former House member Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. We heard about how that one worked out. Let's see. And this is an interesting point, maybe a good transition to the next story if we do this one next. Let's see. Epshteyn often calls Trump repeatedly, delivering positive news. Others close to Trump have said he recognizes that as a good in. He's the good news fairy, a top Trump advisor said. Well, there's more than one, so maybe she wants to get rid of him too. But many of Trump's advisors have grown skeptical of Epshteyn during the transition because he's made recommendations for jobs that are seemingly far afield of his legal responsibilities. At times, others have tried to keep Epshteyn out of meetings, the Washington Post has reported. We just went back and did that one. Now, the last paragraph here. His consulting firm has been hired by Republican campaigns, including, ready for this list of winners? We did Carl Palladino already, but Blake Masters for Congress in Arizona. That didn't work, right? Eric Greitens for Senate in Missouri. Wow, also a bad choice, and that didn't work. Don Bolduc for Senate in New Hampshire. Nope. So 3 big losers and at least one involved in huge controversy that drove him out of politics, at least for now. Greitens. Masters has just been an embarrassment left and right. Bolduc just embarrassed himself left, I guess, and has yet to embarrass himself right. But I'm sure that's coming. And if he's listening to Boris Epshteyn, it's already underway, I am sure. So we said there was another through line here, this time to yet another New York Times article. Too much New York Times. I know. I understand. Maggie Haberman again. I don't know. She's the Trump whisperer, right? Here's a story, not super important, but, a helpful thread in all of this, and a reminder of this person whose name probably will come up again and again in the next administration. Devoted aide who keeps good news flowing, not the good news fairy, Boris Epshteyn, but this aide will follow Trump to the White House. This is Natalie Harp, a 33-year-old former anchor on a right-wing cable show, is poised to become the gatekeeper for information to and from the president. And this is a very dumb president, so watch out. By the way, former right-wing cable show anchor. What color is her hair? Oh, you don't know. All three contestants have already written blonde, it seems. So we'll just dispense with the music. You are correct. Moving on. Maggie Haberman, ably assisted, I guess, maybe, by Jonathan Swan here. And here's the story. Trump, we'll dispense with the honorifics. Trump has always demanded loyalty from his aides, but few have answered the call quite like Natalie Harp. And I mean, people have prostrated themselves before him, embarrassed themselves, turned themselves into dignity wraiths, right? As Josh Marshall has put it, for Trump. So to stand out among this group must really be something. And it is. It's an interesting reporting. A 33-year-old former right-wing or far-right cable host, they say, Ms. Harp is nearly always at Mr. Trump's side, which usually with a young blonde is, troubling. Anyway, she has written him a series of devotional letters, including one that said, quote, "You are all that matters to me." Eek. Once, when Mr. Trump was playing golf in Scotland, she ran behind his cart to keep him up to date with positive stories and social media posts. Wow. Little known beyond Mr. Trump's immediate orbit, Ms. Harp is now poised to play a potentially influential role in his White House, sitting right outside the Oval Office and acting as the conduit for a largely unsupervised flow of information to and from the president and helping him with his social media feed. Underlying all of this is the weird undercurrent of the history of weirdness among presidents of all sorts with young aides who are curiously devoted to him, and Trump's own track record, and it's a little unseemly, but nothing about that is mentioned here. It's just an unstated undercurrent to all of this, and maybe untrue, and maybe unfair, or maybe completely right. I don't know. She has no official title, but during the campaign, colleagues referred to her as the human printer, which is not a particularly damning name, but not a great one either. The human printer, because she followed Mr. Trump around with a portable printer and a battery pack to charge it so that she could hand him information in hard copy as he prefers. But Ms. Harp also established herself at the center of a fast-moving carousel of text messages, articles, and tidbits directed at Mr. Trump. This has generated concern among other aides who feel she has been far too willing to serve as a funnel for conspiratorial information at a moment when Mr. Trump appears more contemptuous than ever of attempts to manage or control him. One of her go-to news sources, people who have observed her say, is this website Gateway Pundit, which frequently disseminates conspiracy theories embraced by the far right. In recent weeks, people with knowledge of her performance say she has been more willing to operate within the transition team's chain of command. That's interesting, and who even knows what the chain of command is, but whoever's leaking that or giving that comment is clearly in good with her or wants to be in good with her, but didn't attach a name to it, so we'll see. Still, her role over most of the past 3 years speaks to Mr. Trump's desire to maintain open channels to a wide assortment, not really, of people and unvetted sources of information, and it underscores his tendency to surround himself with people who tell him what he wants to hear. Great attribute in a president. A top advisor to Mr. Trump used to say that he would ask 49 people what they thought of something, stopping only at 50 if the last person told him what he wanted to hear. Ms. Harp fits well within those patterns. People who work with Mr. Trump have said they have described her as a conduit rather than as a filter. and is an instant enabler of his impulses. Oh boy, well, which impulses? Maybe all of them. I don't know. She types up his thoughts as he dictates them, and she quickly dispatches them onto social media. She has sometimes arranged media interviews for him without the knowledge of Mr. Trump's press team. The Trump transition team declined to make Ms. Harp available for an interview. Next section here titled Trusted and Valued. Mr. Trump has dismissed concerns about Ms. Harp, whom he calls sweetie, and treats like a daughter. Sweetie, come sit over here and let me do a tweet thing, and you tell me what's going on, sweetie. All right. He treats like a daughter, which, could mean anything, according to people close to him. They say he appreciates Ms. Harp in part because she was among the few aides working for him when he was still something of a political outcast after he was voted out of office and after the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Stephen Chung, Trump's spokesman, said Ms. Harp was trusted and valued and credited her work ethic and dedication for helping Mr. Trump win the election. No comment on what that might mean. In responses to a request for comment for this article, the Trump campaign also asked several allies to provide character references. Senator Lindsey Graham, never take a character reference from Lindsey Graham, described Ms. Harp as professional and dedicated. That's nice. Representative Ronnie Drunk-Ass Jackson of Texas said she had a bubbly, outgoing attitude, and I like the bubbly part, give me a bottle of that helped keep Mr. Trump in high spirits. A little bit of pants steaming, maybe, while Hope Hicks is gone. But her direct relationship with Mr. Trump means that she has often operated largely outside of the supervision of more senior aides, a situation that has at times raised alarms among some members of his inner circle who would like to see tighter control of what information he is receiving. When people seeking influence from Mr. Trump want to turn him against their rivals, and I think that's what the last hour of the show has been about, they send damaging clips to Ms. Harp, knowing that she will pass them along unvetted. Did Boris Epshteyn do this stuff? Probably. Does it matter that he actually did the stuff? Probably not. Just leak a story that says he did, get it written up, make the clip happen, send the clip to Harp. President reads it, Boris Epshteyn's in trouble. She is omnipresent in images of Mr. Trump on the campaign trail. And in the days since he won the election, a Trump campaign documentary produced by Tucker Carlson showed Ms. Harp stationed next to Mr. Trump taking dictation for Truth Social posts. When Mr. Trump sent angry text messages to the billionaire donor Miriam Adelson over the summer, it was Ms. Harp who pressed send, according to two people with knowledge of the incident. The texts almost cost Mr. Trump the support of one of his party's biggest donors before intermediaries worked to repair the relationship. That's okay. There's another $100 million where that came from Elon Musk. Harp provided Trump an article that had an illustration of him wielding a baseball bat next to the head of Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who was at the time on the verge of indicting him. Trump quickly posted it to social media, but deleted it after his lawyers pleaded with him to do so. He was in the middle of the case, right, in which he was convicted in 34 counts. She was by Mr. Trump's side at Pervalago, taking dictation for his social media diatribe of more than 40 posts against E. Jean Carroll, whom he had been found liable for sexually abusing, as they put it here. Other Trump aides who were not at the club at the time were helpless to stop him. The most recent incident was a sign of the higher stakes. As Mr. Trump returns to the White House, Ms. Harp posted what was supposed to be a private message to Mr. Trump from President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine for all to see, shortly before the two leaders met in person for the first time in 5 years. Oh, no, that doesn't seem like a good thing. Although Zelensky's smart, he may have known that was going right out the window. The next section is titled, I Want to Bring You Joy. Ew. Ms. Harp, a devout Christian, of course, who grew up in California, first caught the attention of Mr. Trump in 2019 when she appeared on Fox News and credited him with saving her life. I think we heard this story the first time we heard of the human printer. She had bone cancer, she said, And legislation that Mr. Trump signed in 2018, the right to try law, saved her by giving her access to experimental treatments. It is unclear what drugs she was referring to. She's had plenty of opportunity to clear that up, hasn't bothered to do it. Mr. Trump loved the story and invited her to speak on his behalf at the 2020 Republican National Convention, which of course was at the White House. And, let me audition you inside the residence. She joined his staff in 2022 after leaving her job as an anchor at the far-right One American News Network, where she further endeared herself to Mr. Trump by endorsing his baseless claims about the 2020 election being stolen. Did OAN end up getting sued by Dominion, or were they just on the target list? Anyway, Mr. Trump once remarked, while angry after his arraignment in Fulton County, Georgia in 2023, that Ms. Harp was the only member of his staff who cared about him. According to two people familiar with the comment, that seems odd. In 2023, Ms. Harp sent a series of letters to Mr. Trump that unnerved people around him, according to half a dozen people with knowledge of them, although maybe they're just looking to become the new. I can walk around with a printer and be a good news fairy. Why does she get all this power? I can stab her in the back and insinuate terrible things about her and get this job. But according to those reports, those letters read, among other things, "You are all that matters to me," she wrote in one of the letters, which were seen by the New York Times. The letter's authenticity was confirmed by two people with direct knowledge of them. She dots her I's with hearts. I don't know. Anyway, "I don't ever want to let you down," Ms. Harp wrote, thanking Mr. Trump for being her, quote, "guardian and protector in this life," capitalizing guardian, protector, and life, by the way. They write similarly. In another letter, she told Mr. Trump that she wanted to get back to, quote, "that synergy," unquote, that she used to have with him, where, quote, "we'd talk about everything and nothing." It is a little lovey-dovey sounding, right? I'm not just being misogynistic by assuming that a young woman couldn't have tremendous professional skills of great import to the President of the United States. But this president doesn't require any professional skills anyway, so it's a little difficult to believe. But okay, I'm aware that this is possibly unfair, but this is also kind of sounding like that. But maybe I'm just finding it reinforcing of my assumptions and nothing else. But it's a weird letter, a weird series of letters to write to the President of the United States, unless, of course, you're Kim Jong-un, in which case it's totally normal diplomacy. "I want to bring you joy," she wrote, "to feel like we can get through a day without ever having to talk work." Okay. At the White House, Ms. Harp is likely to serve a role unlike any presidential advisor in modern history. There's one or two I can think of, but let's say they're different. While the incoming staff secretary, Will Scharf, it's Scharf, you should probably be hearing more of his name in the future, will be tasked with managing the paper flow in and out of the president's office. And God help you, Trump and paperwork. You're the man now. Those who have worked closely with Mr. Trump know that as long as Ms. Harp is around, there will inevitably be an entirely separate stream of information to his desk. That is a change from Mr. Trump's first 4 years in office, really, when the staff members who controlled his social media feed usually alerted higher-ups of potentially problematic posts, like dismissals of significant advisors. Ms. Harp, by contrast, has mostly run her own program. And that is the end of that article. And yeah, it's a little disturbing. I don't know if there's anything going on in either of their heads enough to worry about. But, of course, it's worrisome in that to the extent that there's not anything happening in their heads, that means there's just room for other things to be planted there. So, yeah, it's something to worry about, of course. Okay. Let's see, just a minute or so before we start worrying about the next break. What can I squeeze in? Nothing in its entirety, of course, but let's see. Let me turn back around on cabinet appointments and go back to Pam Bondi, just so I can bring you this. I saw Greg Sargent on Blue Sky mentioning that he thought that Marcy Wheeler's take on his take about Pam Bondi was of some interest and brought up an interesting new angle on things. And of course, because it's Marcy Wheeler, it quotes extensively from the Greg Sargent post that she's working off of. So we get a twofer. You know, whenever you're reading a Marcy Wheeler post, you kind of get a 2 for 3 for 4 for she gives you all of her source material in sometimes extensive quotes from the original source. She writes, Pam Bondi offers a platform to expose the consequences of Trump's past corruption. And I read it just to see what was going on. And, you know, it's good practice to read a Marcy Wheeler post ahead of time so you can try and digest it. Digesting it on the fly is sometimes difficult, particularly on the radio. But I read through it, and in addition to the interesting dynamic as between her and Greg Sargent in terms of their viewing things from slightly different angles, she also makes a interesting suggestion that is very subtle and a good idea, and I thought maybe we should publicize it. We'll do it after the break. So, senators, hang on until after the break so you can get some idea of what a good line of questioning with Pam Bondi might be. Be right back.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's jump straight back over to Empty Wheels story that I had open. Pam Bondi offers a platform to expose the consequences of Trump's past corruption / whatever it was that Greg Sargent titled his column. It's in here, linked and quoted from extensively. He wrote at the New Republic, Trump AG pick Pam Bondi is about to regret what she signed up for. Sounds good. Whether or not it comes true or not, we have yet to see. But here's the twofer, Marcy Wheeler writing about Greg Sargent and quoting him extensively and then expanding on his ideas. Greg Sargent, she writes, had a column proposing ways for Democrats to really challenge Pam Bondi at her confirmation hearing. He describes it as an opportunity to expose how badly she'll be willing to politicize the rule of law. And the first quote grab here from Greg's piece that Marcy chooses reads, Democrats should start thinking right now about the opportunity presented by Bondi's Senate confirmation hearings next year. This will be a major occasion to unmask just how far she'll gladly go in corrupting the rule of law and unleashing the state on all the, quote, vermin, that's Trump's word, right, that he has threatened to persecute. The Attorney General will be the weaponizer-in-chief of the legal system for Trump, Representative Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland, told me. Marcy then picks up and says, while I agree with Sargent's premise, Democrats should treat Bondi's confirmation hearing as an opportunity, I disagree with his approach, his proposed approach, and that espoused by Jamie Raskin, whom he quotes at length. Sargent's focus is on how Bondi would act under predictable eventualities, and quotes again from him, saying, Trump has threatened to prosecute enemies without cause. How will Bondi respond when he demands such prosecutions? It's a natural question, right? He has vowed to yank broadcasting rights to punish media companies that displease him. and send the military into blue areas for indeterminate pacification missions. His advisors are reportedly exploring whether military officers involved in the Afghanistan mission can be court-martialed. Raskin says Bondi should be confronted on all of this. Quote, ask whether she thinks the First Amendment and due process are any impediment to what Trump has called for, unquote. Now, Marcy again, noting that this approach, this is precisely the approach that failed with Bill Barr, who months after a contentious confirmation hearing kicked off the process of politicizing DOJ. I mean, really kicked it off again, I guess. George W. Bush did plenty to politicize the DOJ as well, but okay. She'll readily acknowledge and reported on extensively. So anyway, most tellingly, Barr was asked questions about the kind of foreseeable eventualities that Sargent describes, such as pardons for January 6thers, and it did no good. Patrick Leahy, Amy Klobuchar, and Lindsey Graham all asked Barr whether pardoning someone for false testimony would amount to obstruction of justice, right? Every time, Barr at least conceded the potential applicability of obstruction in that case. And then, just months after that hearing, when Barr wrote a declination memo for Robert Mueller's obstruction charge, he simply ignored the pardons. He didn't mention them at all. While it took years for us to learn how he had reneged on his own stated views, that is, by simply ignoring them, those setting these expectations never found a way to hold him accountable for the dodge. Now, we got him on record saying that would be obstruction, i.e., therefore I would not do it. No, but what if you mean, well, sure, it would be obstruction, but I'm going to do it and hide it, and you'll find no way of holding me to account for it until it's too late and I'm gone. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, you could run the same play, but you'll probably get the same results, I guess, is what Marcy is thinking here. So that said, January 6th committee staffer Thomas Joscelyn, whom Sargent also quotes, gets a bit closer to the approach I'd recommend. Don't ask Bondi whether she would do something. Make sure you lay out her responsibility for inevitable consequences when things she's likely to do have untoward effects. That's not super clear. What are we talking about? Well, first, she uses Greg Sargent's quote of Thomas Joscelyn to set it up. And the quote is, what happens if Trump pardons the Proud Boy leaders who were convicted for seditious conspiracy and instigating the violence, says Tom Joscelyn, a lead author of the January 6th committee report, in suggesting lines of questioning for Bondi. What about the dozens of defendants convicted of assaulting cops? Joscelyn adds that pardons for them would provide a major boost to violent far-right extremist groups in this country and would legitimize their cause. Dems should confront Bondi with all of that. Make her own every last bit of it. Now back to Marcy. Where I'd add to what Joscelyn suggests is with Trump's past history. Rather than asking Bondi about something we know will happen going forward, like political violence from freed militia members, ask her how she'll avoid the negative consequences of Trump's past actions already had. Trump's past actions have already had. You got it? All right, I know. I should be clear about this. Rather than asking Bondi about something we know will happen going forward, like political violence from freed militia members, ask her how she'll avoid the negative consequences that Trump's past actions have already had. Rather than asking Bondi whether she'll be responsible for Proud Boy violence when Trump pardons them, instead, note that Bill Barr treated threats the Proud Boys and Roger Stone made against Amy Berman Jackson, the federal judge, as a technicality, only to have them then go ahead and plan an insurrection 18 months later. I added a word or two there to try to emphasize what's going on here. Bill Barr's coddling of Trump's far-right extremists led to a predictable increased threat, an attack on the Capitol. How will you avoid the same mistake? It's a slightly different approach, right? A little different in angle and subtly so. It uses the confirmation hearing to lay out the consequences of past corruption. You can use this approach with pardons more generally. Because Trump didn't properly vet his pardons the first time around, at least 7 of them quickly returned to crime, with many of them beating their spouses. How will you ensure that Trump's bypassing of normal pardon protocol doesn't put violent men back on the streets? That's a way of phrasing this question, right? You can pick some of the January 6thers, like hardened criminal Shane Jenkins, who almost had a fundraiser at Bedminster, or neo-Nazi Timothy Hale Cusinelli, who did have a fundraiser at Bedminster, to ask Bondi how coddling such criminals is consistent with the law and order promises that she's making. The difference so far is subtle. Using the hearing to show past consequences for Barr or Trump's own failures rather than generically predicting future woes. But that difference becomes more important when adopting a more important focus for the hearing. Like the legitimization of far-right extremists that Jocelyn predicts, we can predict a number of other inevitable outcomes from Trump's second term. The most important is that as billionaires like Elon Musk loot the government services will decline precipitously, only exacerbating the alienation of many people who voted for Trump. And when those same billionaires get impunity from Trump's DOJ, consumers will have their lives ruined. But Trump will work hard to blame scapegoats, liberals, trans people, and unions, rather than the billionaires Trump chose to give direct control over the looting process. Democrats need to build in accountability for the corruption from the beginning. They need to explain that a crash in life quality is the eventual inevitable consequence of Trump's corruption, and just as important, because committed MAGAs, as she calls them, are more likely to turn on others before they turn on Trump, his billionaire appointees and protected buddies. And Pam Bondi offers a spectacular way to lay that out because she has been involved in protecting the villains who harmed Trump supporters in the past. Ms. Bondi, these ardent Trump supporters who signed up for Trump University racked up debt but got nothing from their degrees. How will you avoid such abuse of consumers going forward, given that you were guilty of it in the first place? Ms. Bondi, after you fired the attorneys who were investigating banks foreclosing based on dodgy paperwork, millions of Floridians lost their homes. How will you protect Americans from similar business fraud going forward? Ms. Bondi, after you and Rudy Giuliani made false claims about the vote in Pennsylvania, many of them threw their lives away by attacking the Capitol. How will you ensure that such lies don't harm Trump supporters going forward? There are similar questions that she can be asked that will anticipate other actions she's likely to take, like shutting down investigations into Elon Musk's various stock manipulations and false claims. Ms. Bondi, how will you protect consumers who purchased cars falsely sold as self-driving? There are other questions that might get at Bondi's past complicity. Ms. Bondi, why did you and Trump's other impeachment defense attorneys claim Trump's demand for an investigation into Burisma was a pursuit of corruption when Trump's own DOJ had just shut down a 3-year investigation into Mykola Zlochevsky's corruption? Well, you might have to clarify that question a little bit for the audience at home. But the most important, and this too is, remember her audience, they've been following each of these players obsessively along with her the whole time. But the most important questions can and should be framed in terms of Trump supporters whom her past corruption has harmed. Democrats are not going to prevent Bondi's confirmation. They're also not going to get reassurances that Bondi will protect the integrity of the department. Bill Barr's prevarications prove that futile, even if they do get them, I guess. But then they can use the high-profile confirmation process as a way to lay out what should be a relentless message going forward. Corruption hurts the little guy. Trump's past corruption has hurt his supporters. Bondi's past corruption has hurt his supporters. That's what the Republicans who will confirm her should have to own. The inevitable consequences of her protection, of Trump's corruption, and that of the other billionaires who will be swarming his administration. All right, a good point and a slightly different one. Always worth checking in to see what Marcy has, especially if it's unwittingly or unintentionally a collaboration with Greg Sargent. Or maybe it is intentional. I don't know. They play off one another all the time because we run in the same circles, I guess, at least when it comes to the writing and commentary. All right, what else do we have to share with you? I got to scan Pocket to see what else I have made available. Let's see. Why is this back in the news? So why did I put? I mean, this seems like old news, but it's new news, and it's in the Guardian. And let's see what it is. Wait a minute. This is their live feed. Is that what this? Did I put this away because of tariff stuff, or was it? I mean, the picture that was displayed was about Hegseth, and I was like, what's up with Hegseth now? Trump's defense pick, Pete Hegseth, faces scrutiny over sexual assault claims and attacks on UN and NATO. U.S. Politics Live. It didn't end up going there. Was there something new about what he was saying, or was it what it actually brought me to when I clicked through was a tariff thing, but I think we've covered the tariffs. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's anything new about either of those subjects in this. All right. So, too bad we're not more organized about that. We should double back and cover the Jack Smith situation and get that one out of the way, even though I'm sure we'll be revisiting this later on. But the upshot of things is, according to the New York Times and the reporting of Alan Feuer, Charlie Savage, and Devlin Barrett, Jack Smith seeks dismissal, and he gets it in at least one instance, of 2 federal cases against Trump. The special counsel effectively brought to close the Justice Department's efforts to hold Donald J. Trump accountable in the election and classified documents cases. Boo. But, it was going to be thrown out, shut down anyway. But, yeah, this is not great. And by the way, I keep remembering all this as people get disappointed and angry and upset. Probably worth remembering at some level that Jack Smith got the nod the same way so many previous special counsels and FBI directors got the nod. We only appoint Republicans to this job. He is a Republican guy. I mean, by most accounts, he did a pretty thorough job with it, but somehow magically it never came to fruition. Not all through his fault, but, might want to throw that into the figuring. Anyway, the special counsel Jack Smith asked 2 courts on Monday to effectively shut down the federal criminal cases brought against Trump last year, bowing to a Justice Department policy that says it is unconstitutional to pursue prosecutions against sitting presidents. Sometimes he stands up, so you can prosecute him when he's walking around. The twin requests by Mr. Smith made to judges in Washington and Atlanta were an acknowledgement that Mr. Trump will re-enter the White House in January, unburdened by federal efforts to hold him accountable through charges of plotting to subvert the last presidential election and holding onto a trove of highly classified material following his first term in office. The double-barreled filings were also the latest sign that Mr. Smith and his team were working to close up shop after years of intensive investigation and courthouse drama that tested the justice system's ability to hold a once and future president to account amid shifting politics, misinformation, and evolving legal standards. Hours after Mr. Smith submitted his request, Judge Tanya S. Chutkan, who was overseeing the election interference case in Washington, issued a brief order dismissing the proceeding. Smith's moves came after the president-elect began filling out his choices to lead the Justice Department. They followed Trump's vow on the campaign trail to fire Smith within 2 seconds of taking office and to launch investigations into the prosecutors who pursued him, along with other perceived enemies. Smith has signaled that he intends to resign before Trump takes office. In both of the court submissions, Smith made clear that his moves to end the charges against Trump were a necessity imposed on him by legal norms, rather than a decision made on the merits of the case or because of problems with the evidence. The filing cited a Justice Department policy that sitting presidents may not be prosecuted, and that policy, Mr. Smith wrote to Chutkan, is categorical and does not turn on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof, or the merits of the prosecution, which the government stands fully behind. Mr. Smith acknowledged the uniqueness of the situation, writing that neither the Justice Department nor the country had ever faced these circumstances here, where a federal indictment against a private citizen has been returned by a grand jury and a criminal prosecution is already underway when the defendant is elected president. Mr. Trump's political strength only grew after the indictments by Mr. Smith and two others by local prosecutors in New York and Georgia, and Trump's allies sought to portray the moves on Monday as a vindication. Smith's decisions to seek the dismissals were, quote, a major victory for the rule of law. And no, the opposite. And an important step in ending the political weaponization of our justice system. Stephen Chung lied to the press. They dutifully reported it here. While Mr. Smith sought to end the criminal cases before Trump was inaugurated, he did not definitively close the door on the possibility of prosecutions one day being revived. In both his filings, a request for dismissals without prejudice, leaving open the possibility that charges might be refiled after Trump leaves office for the second time. But the filings did not address the question of whether the statute of limitations, 5 years for most federal offenses, would make that impossible. Some prosecutors believe that the time Mr. Trump spends in the White House should not be counted as part of that 5-year period, or tolling the statute of limitations, as they would say. Mr. Trump remains a defendant in a separate case brought by the district attorney of Fulton County, Georgia, accusing him of seeking to overturn his election loss there in 2020. That case is tied up in legal wrangling, and its prospects for going forward are unclear. Trump faces also sentencing in Manhattan on state charges of falsifying business records to cover up his sex scandal, one of many, I guess. But that proceeding has been delayed, and the prosecutor has signaled a willingness to freeze the case for 4 years, or whatever it takes, while Mr. Trump is in office. Tersely written and only 6 pages long, Smith's filing to Judge Chutkan in federal district court in Washington effectively ended the Justice Department's years-long effort to hold Mr. Trump accountable for his attempts to cling to power after he was defeated by Joe Biden in 2020. The indictment in that case accused Trump of spreading lies that there had been widespread voter fraud, pressuring other officials to act on those lies, and delivering as an incendiary speech on January 6th, 2021, of course, before a mob of his supporters stormed the Capitol in an effort to block Congress from certifying Biden's victory. Smith's separate filing in the Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit, which is weighing the fate of the documents case, referred to the January 6th case filing and was even terser, but was also more complicated. In that submission, Smith said he intends to pursue the charges against Trump's 2 co-defendants, Walt Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira, who worked for him at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida and were accused of helping obstruct the government's efforts to retrieve the classified documents. And yet, it was not immediately clear how prosecutors could continue their case against the 2 men without Trump, given that so much of the evidence in the proceeding revolves around him. Moreover, Smith did not mention the fact that Trump will regain the power to pardon people for federal crimes when he's inaugurated on January 20th, and there's little reason to expect that he would allow the cases against his employees to move forward past that date. The documents case was already in limbo when Smith sent his filing to the 11th Circuit. The appeals court was considering whether to affirm or reverse a decision this summer by Judge Aileen Cannon, one of Trump's own appointees, and appointed, by the way, after he had already lost, to throw out the charges altogether on the grounds that Mr. Smith had been unlawfully appointed to his job as special counsel. Smith withdrew his appeal with regard to Trump, effectively allowing the case against him to end, but prosecutors will continue to appeal the dismissal of the charges against Nauta and de Oliveira, largely out of a concern that letting Cannon's ruling survive without challenge could affect the Justice Department's ability to appoint special counsels and other top prosecutorial positions in the future. What will the new Attorney General think of pursuing that appeal, or will she be glad that the special counsel statute could be invalidated on that grounds going forward, because then there won't be one appointed to investigate her? Anyway, it was no surprise that Trump effectively dropped both sets of charges against Trump, but the timing of the moves coming 1 week ahead of an early December deadline that he had set for himself to alert the courts about how he planned to proceed with the cases was another indication that the special counsel was racing to wrap up his investigation. The only significant task remaining for Smith's team at this point is filing a report on his investigations, but that document may not contain any major revelations beyond the evidence already laid out in Trump's indictments and follow-up filings, and could be completed relatively soon, according to several people familiar with the situation. Even on its deathbed, the election interference case, which Smith laid out in great detail in a filing to Judge Chutkan last month, will probably have repercussions for decades to come. The charges described unprecedented conduct by a president and represented a major test of prosecutorial power, the courts, and executive authority. The case also resulted in a landmark ruling by the Supreme Court this summer granting Trump and supposedly all future presidents, or rather future former presidents, get that? Future former presidents, a broad form of immunity from prosecution on charges arising from their official duties. That ruling will shape the way presidents are or are not held accountable by prosecutors in perpetuity, or until some new Supreme Court says, to hell with that. The Justice Department first began to investigate Trump's role in seeking to overturn his loss to Biden in the months after the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Prosecutors examined his connections to a wide array of figures, including far-right extremists, political organizers, and operatives involved in a plan to create false slates of electors, claiming that he won the states where he in fact had lost. Around the same time, career prosecutors began a separate inquiry into Trump's refusal to return a highly sensitive trove of state secrets that he removed from the White House and took to his post-presidential home at Mar-a-Lago. Mr. Smith took over both of the inquiries in mid-November 2022 as a way to ensure some measure of independence after Mr. Trump announced that he was launching his third bid for the White House. You know, what independence was there really? It didn't matter. He got attacked just the same as though he were part of the DOJ and being directed by Biden. In June 2023, Mr. Smith brought charges against Mr. Trump in Florida, accusing him of violating the Espionage Act, kind of a big deal, and of obstructing justice. 2 months later, the second indictment was filed in Washington, accusing him of launching intersecting plots to cling to power after losing in the 2020 presidential race. So who cares about elections? Anyway, so yeah, that's of some interest too. We got a couple of minutes here, very few. Let's see, anything else we can squeeze in or just hint at before closing up shop for the day? Yeah, that's a really long one. That one we got to. Let's see. Oh, you know what? Here's a good one. Let's throw this one into the mix. It says it's only a 3-minute read. Let's see what we can do about that. ABC News from November 21st, Alexandra Hutzler. Hutzler? Do I have that right? Yeah. Reporting this under this title, Trump team warns Republicans to support cabinet picks or face primaries funded by Musk. Now, I don't know whether Musk really agrees with this or not, or whether he's in on it or said, I'll do it, or they were just trying to have him say, wait a minute, what the hell? You can't commit me to this. I'm out of here. And maybe scare him away as a through line with some of the earlier things we read. Trump's recess appointments demand seems to be meeting resistance with senators, the subheader says, as controversy continues to cloud some of President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet picks. It's a kind way of putting it. His team has an ominous warning for Republicans who don't fall in line behind his nominees. ABC News chief correspondent, Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl reports that one senior Trump advisor said the message to lawmakers is, if you are on the wrong side of the vote, you're buying yourself a primary. Who is the advisor? Unnamed. Boris Epshteyn? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. Bannon? Could be anybody, I guess. Talking with other people's money. That is all, the advisor told Carl. And there's a guy named Elon Musk who's gonna finance it. Is he? Maybe. He might. I don't know. The president gets to decide his cabinet. No one else, the advisor added. The threat came as Matt Gaetz and Pete Hegseth, tapped for Attorney General and Defense Secretary, respectively, made the rounds on Capitol Hill this week to shore up support. They were escorted by Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, the junior senator from Ohio. We know what happened to Gaetz. Gaetz announced Thursday afternoon, of course, that he's withdrawing his name from consideration, stating that his confirmation bid was unfairly becoming a distraction. Gaetz faces allegations, you know what they are, but we'll say them again, sexual misconduct and illicit drug use, which he's long denied, and that was the subject of a federal investigation and a House Ethics Committee probe. Hegseth has been accused of sexually assaulting a woman in 2017. An encounter Hegseth said told police was consensual. Trump stood firm with the selections, which also raised eyebrows for their relative lack of experience to lead the Department of Justice and Department of Defense. Trump said it was ultimately Gates' choice to withdraw. Some of the president-elect's other picks have similarly faced scrutiny over their qualifications, including Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for Secretary of Health and Human Services. Trump previously made a demand for Republican leadership to back so-called recess appointments to skirt the traditional confirmation process. That route would require lawmakers to adjourn and for senators to give up the advice and consent role they play in nominations as laid out in the Constitution. But hell, why not? It's only another part of the Constitution. But his demand is being met with some resistance from some Senate Republicans. Tom Tillis, senior Republican and member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, said recess appointments for cabinet posts should be absolutely off the table. And quite honestly, any serious candidate for cabinet-level positions, I would really have to wonder if they would want it or be willing to accept it under a recess, Tillis said. Well, don't worry about that. They'll take it. These positions are too important. They carry too much weight internationally to take a shortcut. Unless you do. Several senators said they want the full process and vetting of candidates to play out. Josh Hawley said on Wednesday his intention is to just vote for all nominees. He doesn't care. The Constitution gives us a role in personnel called advice and consent. My view is that that is exactly what will unfold here when these nominees are actually sent forward, and we'll treat them like we've treated all others with the proper vetting, said longtime Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, who recently stepped down from that role. Okay, we managed to get it in there. Oh, we're a little bit late on our music, though. But we got the whole article in. But you get the picture here. That is real interesting. And so we now have to try to figure out, does Elon Musk endorse the threat? Did he know about the threat? Did he make the threat? Did he tell somebody else that they could put the threat forward? Is it somebody setting up Elon Musk in a way that Elon Musk won't accept or will be worried about, or does anything worry him? I don't know. Is it even a possibility? It's just something to think about in the post Citizens United world, that a single multi-billionaire could, in fact, probably, I haven't really worked out the math on this, but imagine that, right? I mean, it's the Senate, so there are fewer such primaries to worry about, but there are going to be 53 Republican senators, and if any of them don't fall in line, I guess they're not figuring on all 53 not falling in line, but if all 53 of them don't fall in line, with $500 million, you can pour $10 million into a primary against them. If $10 million isn't enough, well, with $5 billion of his $300 billion, you can put $100 million into a primary against each one of the 53. So I guess it's entirely possible. The only question is whether Elon Musk knows that his money is being volunteered, cares that his money is being volunteered, or whether he has anything to say about it.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
I may have to check that math later on, but I'll have time to do it because Justice Putnam will have your ear for the next hour with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Kicks off with the Bill Ackerman stuff. Even Bill Ackerman begging could not stop the markets from freaking out after Trump's late-night trade war tirade. I didn't keep an eye on the markets. We were doing the show. He'll keep you up to date. We'll see you tomorrow.